What's going on, everybody? You're alive with Osiris, and welcome to another episode of the Author's Lounge. Today, I have a very, very special guest, and I want to make sure I get all of the details. I actually have it all written down because there's an extensive amount of information here that I want everyone to be privy to. All right, so if I can get this password going, okay. Our guest is a mental health advocate, suicide care advocate, TEDx speaker, better known as TED Talk, public speaker, podcast host, producer, photographer, blogger, and most recently added to their catalog of titles, published author. Their powerful speech on the TEDx stage detailing the struggles of losing a loved one to suicide and overcoming adversity has inspired countless numbers of people globally. In 2017, our guest started the Faces of Fortitude project after losing their 26-year-old brother to suicide. Faces of Fortitude is a portrait series shot in black and white, documenting the images and stories of people affected by suicide. In late December 2024, our guests launched their debut book titled The Little Bloom Book, which is a self-help book that contains story lessons and education which teaches plant care-based steps to assist in improving mental health. With over 20,000 collective social media followers and counting, our guest is focused on bettering the world not only through the power of stories, but through their actions and helping anyone in need. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but after this interview, I'd beg to differ. Without further ado, I present to you the powerful, the almighty, the voice of the voiceless, Abeo. Thank you so much for coming on.
I don't know what to say after that. I don't know if you were talking about me. Isn't it weird sometimes when people pull out everything that we do in a lifetime, and I just turned 50, and they lay it in front of you? It's kind of daunting because it didn't feel like you were talking about me. So thank you for having me.
Yes, no, for sure. It's one heck of a resume.
It doesn't feel like it. It feels like I've lived several lives, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I know you get it. You have children. I feel like when you watch children grow up and you have to remember that you're just doing this life for the first time too. So I've had so many iterations of myself. I look back, and so reading that through kind of made me feel like, oh, I'm doing things. So thanks. Sometimes you forget,
For sure. Yeah, that's an extensive body of work, and it's kind of hard to keep up with what you've done yourself until you hear it all back to you in the catalog, and you just look back and wonder, holy smokes.
It's also easy to it's easy to make those things feel small to yourself. You're like, okay, I did a TED Talk, but it was in Youngstown, you know what I mean? It was in a small city and not very many people have seen it. And so I was like, I've always played things down, and I think I was taught that. Unfortunately, a lot of people are taught that growing up. Right. You can always do better. You can always be bigger. You can always do more, and not taught to sit in my wins a little bit. So thanks for reminding me of that, Osiris.
No worries. The accomplishments are absolutely grand and should be celebrated, especially being on a stage such as the platform that you're on, with it being TED Talk, and not just TED Talk, but you being able to create something for yourself. Well, not necessarily for yourself, but something that you created for people. Faces of Fortitude. So let's go ahead and get into some questions. With the first one being the now I know we were talking beforehand, just about your life and your upbringings. We're going to talk a little bit about just your upbringings. You mentioned Italian or Sicilian. I don't want to confuse you two.
Italian.
Yeah, how was that for you growing up?
I mean, listen, Italian is white. I can say I grew up pretty white, but with a heavy Roman Catholic umbrella over top. I grew up in a restaurant family. I grew up in a family that, as soon as you're old enough to work, you work. Old enough to hold a plate without breaking it. Old enough, you know what I mean? I think I like to think that I've raised my child in a way that feels better than I was raised. I think there were a lot of struggles in my childhood, but there were a lot of things I had a lot of opportunity and privilege too. So it's such a hard question to answer about upbringing nowadays, because I think everybody is now waking up to our own mental health and our own toxicities and things, especially when you become a parent.
Yeah.
All of your own things start coming back to you of how you were raised. And, it's easy to get hung up on them. And we need to remember our parents are just doing this for the first time too.
Absolutely.
And they're just human and fallible. But at the same time, you got to take care of yourself. And what does that look like? So my upbringing was intense. It was intense. And I was on my own really fast as soon as I turned 18, as soon as it was allowed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm born and raised here in Seattle too. So this is my city. I just love this city.
This parts of it too. Me, recently, well, I'm going to San Francisco next
Oh,
week, but
love
I've
it.
been to San Francisco a few times, and my son, who loved the city, when we went to Seattle a few weeks ago. I think this was maybe our third or fourth visit, but there's parts of it that just is reminiscent to the environment of San Fran. But it's just a beautiful city. One thing I was a little upset about though, when I we went there, I think the week of New Year's, the New Year's week, and Kenny G ended up showing up somewhere on the block that we were at just a few days prior in the same spot. And my wife sent me a TikTok video showing me he was playing that New Year's song. I forgot, all day do or
All Lang Syne or something.
something like that.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. And then he was out there on the saxophone right at the countdown and just played it, welcoming in the new year. But
Wow, I did
I was
not
a little
hear about
salty.
that. He's a Seattle staple. He went to high school, like he was born and raised here. Kenny G is
Really?
he went to Kennedy High School, I believe. Yeah, which
Oh,
is no
no
longer.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Was it
mom, like, we grew up loving, like, his Christmas album, for example. Just every Christmas, my mom, when his album dropped, she bought it, bought the OC. I think she probably still has it.
Oh yeah.
Just
I mean, he was a swooner. Yeah, he was a staple here. It's our city. There are pockets in this city that have a lot of history, and yeah, it's a beautiful area. We are very lucky. Everything is very moderate here. The
hmm
politics, the environment, our temperature, our seasons, our hills.
oh
It's
yeah,
like a small San Francisco in many ways to me.
for sure. I would second that thought. Just in the time that I've been in the city, it certainly reminds me of it. I haven't been to the Needle yet, but I saw a picture of you right in front of it. I gotta go
Yeah.
there with my
I
family.
live, well, you gotta let me know. I live like 2 blocks from it.
Okay,
I
yeah,
can
no,
see
I'll
it
do
from
that.
here.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so you're living a good
Yeah, and
life.
well, no, I mean, no, I wouldn't say I'd say I'm in the percentage of people living check to check a lot of the time,
I see.
which, because I want to live within my means,
Hmm.
I think that is a huge issue as to why we are in this mess that we're in,
For
is
sure.
because people don't live within their means. And there are other people who have no means.
Right.
And what does that look like? And, how can we downsize to take care of our community? And so
Hmm.
I'm living downtown. I don't know if I'll stay here forever. It's a lot, it's heavy. We're in a space where there's a lot of tourism, but there's also a lot of crime and a lot
Yeah,
of crime. And that's such a word that I don't even like that word. There are a lot of people struggling. That's
for
better.
sure. Yeah.
And so, but this is actually my neighborhood. So my grandfather's restaurant was just like half a mile away growing up. My
Hmm.
very first apartment at 19 was about a mile away. So this is my area. This is where I grew up. So there are inexpensive areas to live in if you know where it is.
Oh yes. So you're the go-to person if we're in the city and we know, hey, let's hit up M and see
Oh
where
yeah.
M could recommend places
And I'll
for
tell
us.
you where not to go
Yeah, no, for
to.
sure. So okay, so while we're on the topic about cities, you've traveled. It's just there's not a number I can stamp on the amount of places you've been to be able to cultivate a culture for Faces of Fortitude. And so, can you just describe a bit what the idea behind Faces of Fortitude is and how it's continued to help shape you not only as a person but shape the community of people who struggle with that suicide?
Yeah. So I'm what I call a late bloomer. I was a mom and a support system for people for 24 years in my life. And along the way, and because you're a parent, as being a mom, I could wear a lot of hats. I could do a lot of things. I
Hmm.
could spin a lot of plates. A producer, when you call me a producer, I was a trained producer after showing them what I could do, and starting from the bottom as a mother.
Yeah.
And as a mom, they came in and they were like, "This, you want to be like a PA assistant? Like, you want to assist producers? Are you good?" And I was like, "Just give me a shot." I was 40.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Okay, you got to be able to lift 50 pounds." And I barely could do it, but I did it. And I worked my butt off. And they were like, "You're really good at this." I said, "Producer is just a fancy word for mom." Like, really, that's exactly what it was. Yeah. So I started working, and I had an old camera, and in the midst, right before I got that job, I lost my brother to suicide. And in an already dysfunctional family, death of any sort really tests family bonds. When it's a suicide, it's so stigmatized around religion and around, in general, our society. And on top of that, an already dysfunctional, toxic family. So it just broke my family wide apart. And I had never lost, I was 35. I had never lost anyone close to me. And at 35, all of a sudden, I didn't know how to deal with death. I was in a culture, an Italian culture, that saw death as lore. You don't talk about death because that means you're going to die. That's what my grandmother and my mother said. So I didn't know how to handle it. So I started to spiral. I was in a marriage that my partner was struggled with mental health too. So as he began to struggle, I was still grieving the loss of my brother, and I got this job as a producer, and I kind of started to find myself. Yeah, my ex was a very well-known local hip-hop artist here in Seattle, and I did his managing and produced his videos and his tours, and then our daughter has now become a professional dancer, and I helped her get her job and go to all of her auditions. So I was like the mastermind, this person with a two years of business school, barely any college, wanting to help my loved ones. And then all of a sudden I, at 40, had this own not career yet, but just this little, this is something I'm good at. Yeah. And a woman came I worked at this production company called Creative Live. They've now been absorbed into the company Fiverr. But when they were still a startup, that's where I got my first producer job. And they really helped me a lot. And we did this thing called Photo Week. And photographers from everywhere would come and take these classes. And this woman came to speak to everyone. Her name was Stacy Pearsall, and she was a wounded war vet who was wounded in combat, but she was a combat photographer. So she actually went, what those are. Oh, yes. So Stacy was a combat photographer who was injured in combat, and then in the hospital started taking photos of other vets and sharing their stories. And she called it the Veteran Portrait Project. And she talked to us about how taking something painful, something traumatic, and turning it into something creative that can not only help heal yourself, it can help heal other people. Yeah. And I sat and watched this, and I had this 10-year-old Nikon in my closet. My ex-father-in-law worked for a news company, and he would do press. So he gave me this old but really nice camera. No idea how to use it. When I was around my friends, I'd be like, "Can you set it up for me so I can take pictures of my daughter?" I was that mom. And I looked at her afterwards and I said, "I think I have an idea for a project." And I told her, and she said, "There's nothing like that out there. That I think people need it." And I did it. And she looked at me and she said, "You need to create a name." And she said, "I'll help you with all the technical stuff. But you need to figure out what you want to call this, and you need to be your first face." Yep. So I shared my story, and I took my own picture at a time when I really hated my photos of myself. And it exploded. I put it on Instagram and it exploded. And strangers started coming to me saying, "Take my picture." And I was like, whoa, I didn't think I didn't think it was gonna explode. Yeah. And it became something a lot larger than me. And it just shows that we've been socially trained to not celebrate sadness, to not celebrate our feelings when they're hard, to not move through them, to avoid them. And especially if something is devastating, to just avoid it altogether. Right. I feel like we're all put on this earth with something that we're good at, or something that is a superpower. And I feel like that's mine, is to be able to sit with people and listen to those things and hold space for them, because I don't see them as sad. And I don't want people to misunderstand that. But when people share these when people come, I have another session. I'm restarting this year on Saturday, and every single story breaks my heart open in a different way.
Yeah.
But when you break your heart open is where you find things.
Absolutely.
And so I see people break their hearts open in front of me and find parts of themselves they didn't know they had.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I try to capture right there.
That's
and
perfect.
there's a moment, and I see it in their eyes every time, where they realize that what they went through was horrible. Somebody else is seeing that. And not only did they survive it, but now they're flexing different.
Right,
You know?
right. Oh, yeah. Now, why black and white? That particular the color
Yeah,
contrast.
that's a great question. When I sat in that studio to take my portrait the first time, I had so many things about myself I hated. I was very, very insecure about my body, about photos of myself at that time. And I said, okay, so what can you do to make the pictures better? What are the things you hate? Well, I hate when I cry, because people cry in every session almost. When you cry, I hate how my nose gets all red, or my eyes get puffy and red, or some people will get blotches on their skin. Black and white takes all that away. So the only thing that you're focusing on is the emotion on their face and the human in front of you.
That's freaking awesome. That's a great tactic.
Nothing.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it because I needed that, because I kept looking at these pictures of myself and I was like, I'm mad at this and I'm mad at that. And then I turned it black and white and I went, oh, there she is.
Yep. There's the emotion there.
There they are. Like, I just want to see your eyes. I want to see that moment where you're like, this was the most horrible thing I've ever gone through and I'm still here. I want to see that.
That is powerful. That's powerful. That's part of the reason why I feel you're the voice of the voiceless for reasons such as that. So while we're on the topic of creation and the amount of passion that you put into a project, let's talk about your book, the Little Bloom book. Let's get into this. I am
This
very
little
much
baby.
I'm very much looking forward to hearing about even the plant-based therapy, which is not something that I even considered. We used to buy essential oils and essential oil diffusers, and used to use the smell as a way to help cleanse us and de-stress us, keep us in a relaxation mode. But I've never actually considered it as a form of therapy or any form of treatment. But given your experience, like, what can you detail a bit about your book and how this book will actually be more of a problem solver than it would be just a simple read?
Yeah, so this book was born out of strife. This book was born, and I keep prefacing with, this is a little book. It's a small book. It's called the Little Bloom book for a reason. I'm not a big read. I don't like reading long stints. People with ADHD will understand. Like, I'd rather be taking a nap. And especially if you have young kids, you understand that too. I wanted something that people could pick up and read. At the beginning of quarantine, I went through some transitions and I was at the peak of Faces of Fortitude. I had my TEDx talk. I had a second one on the way. I had just photographed Robin Williams' son, Zach Williams, to talk about his dad's suicide. So it was a little out of control. I could not make space to deal with the feelings that were coming up for me in that time. So I had put them to the side. And then quarantine happened. And all of the plates I was spinning dropped. And I had to sit with myself. I got a separation ahead of our divorce.
Yeah.
So I was living by myself in a quarantine without community for the first time in 25 years. So the first time as an adult living by myself, I was terrified. I was depressed. I was lonely. All of this work I had done, all of the stories that had broken my heart open, all of my feelings that came up for each story that never was dealt with came up for me. Okay. And it was in the midst of a really dark moment that I realized I wasn't alone. I wasn't by myself. I had all of these plants around me that I had only probably 10 or 11 at that time, maybe 10 plants, and they were alive. We are symbiotic with plants. And so one day, one of my most prized plants got sick and she got spider mites, and there were just, spider mites usually mean death to a plant. So you have to chop it all off, but I didn't want her to die. And so I looked it up and I I gave her a little space. I like gave her oils. I talked to her. I was like, you are going to do this. We're going to pull through.
Yep.
And then after a few weeks, there was a little furl.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, and I started to cheer. And
Yeah.
then, Osiris, when I tell you, I took a step back and I went, this plant was under $20 at my local grocery store.
Yeah.
I had not showered for 3 days. I was not taking care of myself. But this little plant, this being that we are symbiotic with, we are mutually symbiotic with plants, meaning they need us and we need them to survive. But I was taking care of them better than I was taking care of myself. This complex, amazing plant that has even created another being inside of me, and I was not giving myself even half the love that I was giving this plant. So I saw something there.
Yeah.
And I sat down and I said, okay, what are the steps that you take to take care of your plants every day? And how can you take care of yourself the same way with each step? I mean, I know people have heard this analogy, but if you look at the palm of your hand, look at a leaf. Go look at a leaf. It looks exactly like the palm of your hand.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right.
Like,
you're right.
We are plants. We are living beings. We are magic, like the universe. Like, we don't go out to connect with nature because we want more of nature. We are nature.
Right.
We are plants. We are magical beings. So what do you do to take care of your magical being? How do you do that? So I started doing it, and this book was written. So basically, it's the stories of what happened during quarantine to get me there. Very high level. The internet is a huge example. Like, there's a whole part of the book because the internet became a huge distraction for me when I was without community in quarantine. I was on TikTok. Things were wild, and I had to step away. My therapist was like, you need to figure out who you are without all of this.
Right. Exactly.
And then the book was born. So I think this book, I'm hoping in this current climate, because we are going through a racial reckoning, we are going through a change of guard, we are going through a revolution. It is being televised this time.
Yeah.
And that is the difference, is right. We're not used to, and we are not built to handle this much grief and trauma in front of our eyes every day. The human brain we are boiling, right? Literally and figuratively. So I think the Little Bloom book is it takes you back to the small part of you. And I don't tell this story often because I don't want to ruin the book for people, but I'll do it here. All of the paintings in the book I've painted, and the painting on the cover is actually the content of the afterword, which this book speaks to the young part of yourself. That is really where we're finding ourselves again at the, whether you call it reparenting, whether you just call it listening to yourself. And I think that we've overcomplicated things.
Right.
And the Little Bloom book is going to hopefully bring people to a place of back when we could be imaginative and inspired and curious like a child. If your small child does something that feels angry or painful, we don't want to yell at them. You say, what made you do that? So why don't we do that with ourselves? Like when I bump into somebody at the grocery store and then I'm like, man, watch yourself. I need to look at me, not them, and go, man, why'd you do that? Are you okay? Are you okay? What do you need? Why are you do you need some water? Do you need a breath? Not mean, not judgmental, but curious. So I'm hoping that this book can help people, because we're not going to be able to resist. We're not going to be able to be part of this revolution, no matter what our skills are, if we're not well.
Exactly.
And I think that by going within and using these plant themes and being able to take care of ourselves like the complicated plants we are, then whatever we put out into the world is more centered, is more healed, is at least more aware, present. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does, and that's just beautifully said. And so, before I wrap this up, with a nice little bow. If you can please show that book again, because my last question that I have for you before I get out of here, look at that little bloom book. Is where can people purchase your work, and where can they find you?
So you can purchase the Little Bloom book if you just Google it. It will come up at any of your favorite places. I'm not a fan of pushing corporations, so if you want the money to go to the author, go to Bloom Book Baby, which is where I published. But you can also go to all of your big box stores. They're slowly stocking it. You know, it came out the day after Christmas, so they're stocking it a little slower. That's just how it happens. If you want, I think the best thing for you to do would be to go into your favorite bookstore and ask to order it. I think that gets it on the shelves because somebody wants to actually purchase it, and that's how they know their stock will be bought. And then on social media, it's just Faces of Fortitude. If you Google Faces of Fortitude, I think pretty much everything comes up, but it's just at Faces of Fortitude on everything.
It sure does. That is true. Faces of Fortitude, wherever you type it, and nonetheless, I will make sure I link M's information that they are referencing right in the description, wherever this is going to be posted. So, hey, this was an incredible session. I very much appreciate you deciding to come on and taking this time to not only talk in a way about what you went through, but also being able to provide a platform that helps people, and that can continuously help people, not just through Faces of Fortitude, but through your book as well. And both will live on for forever. So, hey, but thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to tune in to today's episode of The Author's Lounge. This has been very much appreciative that you all have been able to come by and listen to myself and the guests that we have on, and each guest has a purpose as to why they're on the platform. And so I hope that you all just continue to support these individuals as people and support what they have to offer, because it is grand what they have to offer, and they have a powerful message behind why they're doing it. So, hey, my name is Osiris. I'm here with M, and thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day, and I'll catch you all next time. Take care.